They were called to serve a country that didn't serve them. In 1917, over 150 black soldiers from the 24th Infantry Regiment were stationed in Houston, Texas, a city steeped in Jim Crow segregation and white supremacy. These men wore the uniform of the United States Army, but to many in Houston, that uniform was a threat. They came to build, to protect, to serve. But what they faced was hatred, humiliation, and ultimately, death. The Houston Riot wasn't just a violent clash. It was a cry for dignity, a warning, and a story history tried to erase. In April 1917, the United States entered World War I. The nation needed soldiers. It turned to its black citizens, who, despite living under the brutal rule of Jim Crow, answered the call to serve. Among them was the 24th Infantry Regiment, an all-black unit with a proud record dating back to the Indian Wars and the Spanish-American War. They were seasoned, disciplined, and unwanted by many. In July, the regiment was dispatched to Houston to guard the construction of Camp Logan, a new training base. But what awaited them was not camaraderie, it was contempt. Houston in 1917 was a tinderbox. Segregation was law, racial violence was routine, and the sight of proud black men in uniform walking the streets ignited rage in the white population. The soldiers were subjected to daily abuse. They were beaten, arrested, and spat on, for no other reason than wearing the uniform of the U.S. Army. The final spark came on August 23rd. A black soldier, Private Alonzo Edwards, tried to stop police officers from assaulting a black woman. For his courage, he was pistol-whipped and thrown into jail. News spread like wildfire. Rumors swirled that a white mob was coming for the soldiers next. Fear met fury. And then came the march. Over 100 soldiers armed themselves and left Camp Logan, believing they were heading into a fight for survival. As they entered Houston, panic erupted. Gunfire rang out. Chaos overtook the city. By night's end, 15 white civilians and law enforcement officers lay dead. 4 black soldiers were also killed. Martial law was declared. The army acted swiftly and mercilessly. Over 60 black soldiers were arrested. 3 mass court-martials followed, the largest in U.S. military history. There were no defense attorneys, no appeals. 19 black soldiers were sentenced to death by hanging. They were executed at Fort Sam Houston, some before their families even knew they were convicted. Dozens more received life sentences. No white officers, no police, and no civilians were ever charged. The men of the 24th Infantry faded from the headlines and from history. No memorials were built. No medals were awarded. No names etched in stone. Their story was buried, until historians, activists, and descendants began to unearth the truth. Institutions like the Buffalo Soldiers National Museum and scholars like Dr. John D. Weaver and Dr. Carlos Hill have worked to restore their legacy. And today, over 100 years later, we ask, what do we owe them? What does justice look like, so long delayed? The Houston Riot of 1917 wasn't just a chapter in a forgotten war. It was a battle between 2 visions of America, one of white supremacy and one of equality under the law. The men of the 24th Infantry were not traitors. They were soldiers. They were citizens. They were human beings demanding dignity. Their fight echoes today, in courtrooms, classrooms, and communities still confronting the consequences of silence. These soldiers fought for a country that didn't fight for them. Over 100 years later, we fight not just to remember them, but to restore their honor.